Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two wonderful poets. Both of them, there's elegance in each of their poetry. Maurya Simon and Kim Dower. Maurya will read first and then Kim. Maurya Simon's newest volume is La Sirena, a novella in verse. The Independent Booksellers Association awarded her earlier volume, The Wilderness, New and Selected Poems, the 2019 Gold Medal in Poetry. Simons received a Fulbright Senior Research Fellowship, South India, and NEA Poetry Fellowship, and the Lucille Medwick Memorial and Cecil Hemley Memorial Awards from the Poetry Society of America. She served residencies at the American Academy in Rome, the Baltic Center for Writers and Translators, Sweden, Hawthornden Castle, Scotland, and the MacDowell Colony. Simon's poems have been translated into Hebrew, French, Spanish, Greek, and Farsi. She currently serves as a professor of the Graduate Division and a professor emerita at the University of California, Riverside. I love her new book, La Sirena. It's sensuous, mythical, soothing. It's inspired writing. Here's a magnificent poet, Maurya Simon.
Thank you, Harry. I don't know if the audience realizes that Harry is a terrific poet in his own right. And not only that, he's also a very fine actor. And he has been featured in several really wonderful classic American films, including Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Taxi Driver, Silence of the Lambs, Mean Streets, I think is another one. There's a long list. So we have a very distinguished host and curator of this wonderful series. So applause for you, Harry.
Thank you.
This new book, La Sirena, is a novella, so it's got a strong narrative and a plot. So I thought before I started reading some of the poems from it, I would give you a little bit of a sense of what the book's about. It is a coming-of-age story. It has as its main protagonist a young girl who's about 14 years old when the book opens, named Melusina. Melusina or Melusine is the name of, in European folklore and fairy tales, the name of a water spirit or water sprite from sacred wells and springs and rivers. And she lives in Hermosa Beach, California, Southern California. She has a family. The other characters in the novella are her parents, her abuelita. She has a grandmother, her sister, and then there's some more minor characters, a bruja, a sea witch, and Dewey Weber, who was an actual person who lived in Hermosa Beach in the 60s, who was a very famous longboard surfboard maker, and two dogs who are also shapeshifters. So it's a story. Melusina is a shapeshifter too, as is her family, as are her family members. And this causes her, because she's growing up, an adolescent coming of age, it gives her great turmoil, inner turmoil, to be basically a hybrid, half child, half woman, half fish, half human, half Anglo, half Latina. She is becomes voiceless in the book and is a lover of language who is voiceless. So she has all of these dilemmas that she's dealing with and all of these contradictions in her character. And the book is really about her quest to know what she is and who she is. And I think as the great, one of our great contemporary playwrights, Suzanne Laurie Parks, said about herself and some of her characters, that her vulnerability and her introspection are her superpowers. And that's very true of Melusina, that she's quite vulnerable, but she's also quite introspective. Couple other things I should mention. There are some Ladino words in this, and Ladino is still existing language that is spoken or was actually derived in 15th century Spain and Portugal by the Sephardic Jews. It is a language that is absorbed Spanish, Portuguese, Hebrew, Aramaic. And when the Jews were expelled from the Iberian Peninsula, and there was a diaspora in 1492 because of their expulsion by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, the language lived on. And there are still pockets, there are a little more than 50,000 people who still speak Ladino in the world, in Bosnia, Turkey, Greece, Herzegovina, and in the US, Israel, and in Israel. So there are some Ladino words that I may say in this book. So I'll start with, and I'm going to read chronologically, and obviously there are going to be huge gaps in the plot, but I'll try to fill them in a little bit. And again, Melusina is around 14 when it opens. Looking glass. Naked in the bathtub, both doors bolted, she floats in serenity. Her stomach's an island rising amid a froth of bubbles. Her smooth breasts bob whitely in bright contrast to her browned belly, thighs, and arms. She's immersed in an ooze of pleasure, suspending time somehow, interrupting the flowing universe. But when she picks up a wooden hand mirror, she's shocked to see a torch burning under her skin, her young face shimmering with fathomless dangers, her ojos shaped like flying fish, irises gray as sea lettuce, her mouth curved in a grunyon's thin-lipped smirk, her nose like a dolphin's. There are two tiny slits, gills, behind each of her earlobes, slowly opening and closing. This poem is called Cyanomelia, and cyanomelia is a condition that babies are sometimes born with, where in the womb or congenitally their legs are fused together and they look like a mermaid or a merman, merchild, I should say. Cyanomelia. At dusk, the sand glows like amber. Tamed waves shimmer under layers of gold leaf. Melusina sits on shore under a meniscus of moving cloud shadows, alone and brooding. Today she read about Cerón, a Peruvian girl with mermaid syndrome, legs fused into a tail, her tiny feet splayed outward in fleshy fins. A rare anomaly, such doomed babies often die within hours of their birth. Was I not meant to live, she wonders, even though my transformation arose from my family's ancient inborn design? All life is a slow motion dying, a violence sent incrementally to our cells. An agile tern chitters as it wings northward. A sailboat on the horizon veers south toward the U-shaped harbor and its safe portage. Melusina's heart swims in her chest when she imagines that chimera, an infant girl destined for freak shows, a look-alike poked and prodded by experts who will endure surgery to split her merged legs into walking sticks. We are the walrus, she sighs. She's a very articulate 14-year-old, I should mention, who loves language, as I said. Déjà vu. It will happen as she's dreamed it. Melusina and her sister sprawling on their bellies at the end of a splintery slip, dragging a dragonfly-weighted line through oil-slicked water. A spectacular lionfish floats up towards them like an inflated piñata. And as she reaches to haul it in, a voice roars at her, "Stop!" Then she's lifted backwards by her neck's scruff and knocks her sister off the platform and into the harbor. Hears her sister spluttering and sees her dog pedaling towards Melusina. A man yells, "What the hell you girls think you're doing? You touch that fish's spines, it'll kill you." It's Dewey, his breath foul with alcohol. Then he hoists her gasping sister back up onto the wooden deck, shaking his bald head. A famous man, curmudgeon, longboard maker, their town's surfing legend. Years they biked beneath Dewey's oceanfront windows, seeing him float above the strand in his aquarium living room, always a beer can in his hand as he gazes past the horizon. A huge swordfish, wall-mounted behind him, perpetually grins. No words spoken between them. She's alive now because of him. So she has her various struggles in school and out with her sister, who's spectacularly beautiful and with whom she's quite jealous, of whom she's quite jealous. And yet she loves her sister dearly also. So here's a poem that involves both of them. Ode to the Boatman. The rising waves' translucent green upswells surge, then collapse over their curved backs as the two girls dive down deeper underneath each thunderous glass mountain of seawater, their hands churning up storms of sand. They open and close their mouths underwater to shout silently in sisterly gulps. But a southwesterly riptide drags them backwards towards the slippery horizon. Why struggle anymore? They will surely drown, or they won't drown. But then suddenly he's there, his boat sluicing towards their pale faces. He's too close, he'll graze their tired body, shear off their ears. But no, he's an agile sailor. As his catamaran glides by, he bends down and swiftly hauls both girls up on deck. It's summer, and the world's turned silent. The ocean's tamed itself into a meadow. Radiant, he says, gazing at Melusina's sister. She smiles her brilliant, mysterious smile, each tooth sharp as a tiny spear. Forbidden fruit. When she turns of age, Melusina initiates herself. First cigarette, first vodka stupor, first sex. Easy, the first two rites, not the third. Trembling, she and a beloved friend lay down on her parents' musty bed to enact their heated, open-mouthed prayer that petitions each body's threshold. She feels embryonic in her lust, her lips brushing against the infinite dark. Afterwards, as they bruise the silence, she becomes a drenched meadow, a heavy, thrusting river, a deep bell that's cracking. So she has a dream of a sailor whom she saves, whose ship sinks, and very much follows in this story in some ways, or maybe I should say loosely follows The Little Mermaid, the Danish story. And she falls in love with him, and she decides to give up her life as a mermaid, and she visits La Bruja, and she drinks the potion. She sells her grandmother's jewelry and as a trade, and loses her tail, her ability to swim as a mermaid, and also loses her speech and is voiceless. And the Bruja, I think, gets a bad rap in the Hans Christian Andersen tale, and also certainly in the Disney movie as well, which is a really terrible retelling of the original story. And so this poem is called The Sea Hag's Lament, and I see her, and it's a poem about, and it's in the voice of the Bruja or Vieja, and I see her as being much more human and wounded than I think she's usually regarded. The Sea Hag's Lament. Not always sea witch, hated and feared, not always a gap-toothed vieja, but beauty and la amabilidad. I also was a changeling like Melusina, also a brave girl before bad luck struck me down, before cruel men took me, used me like a rag, and tossed me out with sea trash to drift into despair, loneliness, utter madness, until only La Magia saved me, taught me how to spin spells, how to punish and reward. Ripped, torn apart by those sailors because my songs seduced them. But why such merciless brutality? Why such loathing against a woman? I let revenge fuel my days and nights, composing drowning storms to scour every mariner who scorns us. It keeps me alive, though ruined, broken down, shattered, damaged, cracked, faulty. Yoy estoy wasted by this hunger that's never quenched, by this human torment. Melusina leaves home, goes and lives with the prince, who just thinks she's a homeless girl that's wandering the beach below his mansion on Palos Verdes Peninsula, and falls in love with someone else, another man as it happens. And Melusina is devastated and betrayed by this. And this is a poem about the aftermath of her betrayal. The Body Politic. For weeks after he withdraws from her, she sleeps with her bedroom lights aglow, stark beacon for the drowned. She beds herself down like an invalid or like a hypothermic survivor from the sinking Titanic. Her thoughts so gnarled, her 16 years choking her pulse like coagulating oil. She dreams him looming over her with his paralyzing eyes. She dreams her words returning with knives piercing her throat. She inhales the world's cruelty, fumes that permeate her lungs. But what surprises her is this. Her body's become something that's darkly seething, vitriolic, grotesque. Like a giant oyster, she's made of her rage, a perfectly hard, glinting perla negra. And I will just read two more poems. She finally leaves the prince and his mansion and is joined by her sister and swims home. And this is a poem about that happening. Butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, free. As long as she can swim, she'll never outgrow her salvation. For waters the purest baptismal, it washes the suffering hours out of her senses. Its currents permeate her with zigzagging bolts of radiance. As she swims, her heartbeat sings its titled song. Her skin glows like the inner rose of a conscious labyrinth. Her hopes, a heliotrope meadow, bluer than the moon-laced shadows streaming behind the two sisters. Submerged, Melusina's born and reborn again over and over, till she's merely a reflection of the inebriated sky. And this last poem is called A Fleeting Bliss, and it's one of the two poems at the end of the book that are in Melusina's voice rather than in third person. A Fleeting Bliss, and it's about the death of her grandmother. Mi madre tells me that on the night she died, Abuelita lit 100 Yarzite candles, which she'd arranged haphazardly in the sand. Then she stripped off her flannel nightgown, her body withered, yet mysteriously aglow, as if she was enshrouded by moonlight. No one else saw this miracle. Only mi mama witnessed how Abuelita's feet and her body rose above the ground, how she slowly floated, a transient angel, across the beach towards the vast ocean, her long white hair trailing its cloudy banner behind her. Abuelita hovered over the dark water, then turned to signal adios to my mother before she silently sank into the waves at last, her skin melting into the fluid blue current, her bones turning to foam, a beautiful alchemy. Then her sighs rose up into the cries of seagulls. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurya. That was really, your strength of narrative, your superlative use of language. There's depth, there's transformation, there's a transcendence. And I'll just quote a couple of lines from the first poem you read, Looking Glass. Well, I don't know if I'm quoting it, but what I wrote down was, it's inviting water slipping in and out, a baptism, a washing, a feeling of being enveloped by the language, a mermaid of itself, lovely, in love with the seductive language of Maurya Simon's La Serena, an enjoyment of form and content. I mean, it's just really, it's human. It's, she's such a mythic figure, the human, and she's almost all too human. And it's just amazing how you're able to tell this story and keep it human, and then, the mythic too. How did you get this idea to do this story?
That's a good question. I started this book over a decade ago, and it just seemed like an impossible book to write for many reasons, partly because the Disney mermaid story looms so large in our culture. But I had read as a child The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen and had been really moved by it. I think because of the losses that the protagonist suffers, and also the kinds of awakenings and the kinds of things she learns through her losses. And I think maybe that's what appealed to me initially, though the story kept changing and evolving. The story itself was a shifter over the 10 years that I wrote it. So but initially I think it was just this idea of this girl who's part human and part animal, who who has to deal with being other in the world, and as an adolescent, and how that affects her life. So I don't know if that answers your question, Harry, but
well, you know what? I don't think you read this book, Venus Unbound, but I remember when I read it, I'm quoting you, you say, how could she have known that there is no end to longing? And so, I'm a elder, I'm in my 9th decade, and I identified with her, all the human feelings that are in her. And the cast of characters is, quite amazing, to say the least. But, just incredible. This is a different type of writing than usual for you, is it, or is it not? I don't know all of it.
It is. Oh, yeah, it's very different. I did write another book that was a novel in verse about two, St. Jerome and St. Paula, two historical people who actually lived in a kind of a love story about them. But it had long narrative lines, and this book is made up of very short lyrical poems. So structurally, it was very different. And then having this whole cast of characters was very different for me. So I guess I wanted to challenge myself and do something different. That was part of it. It is very different from my other books, other poetry. Yeah.
I like that. And, there's also a serenity about this language, the story that you tell, and there's, to use three of your words in one of your poems, dazzling and soothing. And it has those qualities too, and there's an amazement of, how you're doing all this. And, how long did it take you to write this book?
I spent over a decade writing it, but I would put it down for maybe 6 months and then come back. I did not work continuously on it. And as I said, I must have revised it 150 times. It changed, it was all in prose poems, like little blocks of verse initially. Then I put it all in free verse, and I did a hybrid of free verse and prose poems. And, it was a long undertaking for such a short book. It's really a very slim volume, but I tried to make it very dense and yet have a feeling of fluidity and movement and so forth. Yeah.
And the transformations that she goes through, human and then the lure of the sea, and it just really it's a unique book. All the characters that you talked about earlier on, just to let us know, and that's pretty amazing too in poetry, right? How would you call this a lyrical narrative, human mythic story, or is that too simple? I know it's more than that. But...
No, I think that's perfect. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think you spot on. I think you got it. One thing I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that one of the most interesting challenges for me was to make the ocean a character in the book. I really wanted the presence of the ocean to be as if it was an important character too. So I hope I pulled that off, or I did try to pull that off. We'll see if it worked. But anyway. Yeah.
Well, you did it, as I quoted from your looking glass, that slipping in and out of the water, that seductiveness of it right there, and the visual too. Well, it's really an astounding book, and thank you. It's a blessing to have you on the show,
Thank you,
Maurya, and thanks once again. It was really a transcending story and form and content that you're telling that's all together. So it all fits perfectly. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Maurya Simon. And forgive my pronunciation sometimes.
That's right. Thank you, Harry. I look forward to hearing Kim's poems.
Yes. Our next poet is Kim Dower. Kim Dower was City Poet Laureate of West Hollywood from October 2016 to October 2018. She has published 5 highly acclaimed collections of poetry. Her last book, I Wore This Dress Today for You, Mom, was called A Fantastic Collection by the Washington Post. Shelf Awareness says, quote, widely admired for ability to texturize the everyday with the sublime, Kim Dower captures with poetic grace exquisite remembrances of childhood with vibrant imagery. These gorgeous poems are energized by the sheer power of her wit and irreverent style. Her collection, Sunbathing on Tyrone Power's Grave, won the 2020 Independent Publishers Book Award Gold Medal for Poetry. Her sixth collection, What She Wants, Poems on Obsession, Desire, Despair, Euphoria, will be published by Red Hen Press in January 2025. There's joyfulness, warmth, sagaciousness, eloquence in Kim's poetry. Here's a marvelous poet, Kim Dower.
Thank you so much. Moira, I just want to say I enjoyed your reading so much. And everything Harry said about it is so true. Harry, you really nailed it. And it was very calming and peaceful to hear those poems. So I've gotten very sort of sleepy now, and I have to get my energy. I want to hear more of your work. I also love, the part human and part other. I think that when we're writing poems, we're part human and part other also, because I don't know where some of these ideas come from. It's the other human in me. Anyway, I'm taking a big chance today, and I'm using Harry's Poetry Hour. I'm very excited to be using this to read some of the poems from the collection that's coming out in January. I put together poems from other older books, and I thought, I'm just going to bring these poems out. Many of them have not been heard yet. So the new book called What She Wants, Poems on Obsession, Desire, Despair, Euphoria, is quite different from I Wore This Dress Today for You, Mom. And I've gone from motherhood to obsessive love, which was a fun little transition. So I'm going to read some of the poems from this new collection. And the book sort of it has a through line where I talk about the 4 stages of limerence, which is a word that means being obsessively infatuated with someone and having desire that's sometimes uncontrollable. And there's 4 stages of it: infatuation, crystallization, deterioration, and ecstatic release. So the book is divided into those 4 sections, and I'll read some of the poems in order from different sections. The first poem in the book is called She'll Do Anything for Food, which is the first line of the poem. She'll do anything for food, the dog walker tells me. She speaks quietly, not wanting to insult her heavy-boned, one blue, one brown-eyed beast tugging at her leash. We did a doggy ancestor test, she confides, discovered she's part wolf, part miniature poodle. Must be the poodle part makes her so ravenous. Small creatures are ruthless feeders. Think of enraptured rats gnawing their way through orange trees, babies nursing, sucking so fiercely they can burst a nipple. Think of your heart, size of a throbbing fist, the part of you that will do anything for love. So this poem was inspired by a trip to one of our favorite local health food stores. I won't even say the name, but I've actually written several poems about visits here because I find it funny to go to this store, even though it's really too expensive to be funny. Anyway, this poem is called Unruly Aura. The cashier at the health food store tells me I have a beautiful aura. Wait, I tell her. If you want to see a really beautiful aura, wait until I've taken my Renew Life Ultimate Flora Probiotic. After that, my aura will knock your socks off. She smiles at me and rings me up. My money has a beautiful aura, too. My dollar bills float out of my pink wallet. The man behind me swells from the heat I generate. Each step I take brings me closer to God, the final, fabulous aura. Take my hand, I tell her. Squeeze my aura. It's hungry and looking for someone to devour. So a lot of the poems in this book are not funny. They're very serious, but it's mixed, as a lot of my books are mixed with funny and not at all funny. This poem was inspired by a news story I read that they took the last phone booth out of New York City, which was very sad to me. As someone who grew up in New York City and spent a lot of time in her youth in phone booths, I needed to write an ode to the phone booths in New York City. We'd cram ourselves in after school. One more, okay, just one more, okay, you. Our shoulders crushed, groping like idiots, cheeks smashed against the glass. One of us with a finger in the accordion door, pour our dimes into the slot, call our mothers to say Donna's for dinner or Joey's to study, then go off to Central Park. Sometimes it was just me and Melissa. Thunderstorms, humidity creeping into the booth. She'd sit on the seat, heavy phone book on a wire swaying between us while I made collect calls with a fake credit card to random people, the excitement killing us. Senior year, it'd be me alone, excusing myself from my parents' dinner table, running a brush through my hair, elevator down, making the call to my boyfriend, filthy receiver tight in my hand, mouthpiece caked with someone else's spit, smelling like the inside of someone else's mouth. I'd hang up. His mother or sister answered. They couldn't know we were about to meet, walk into the dark opening of the park, find our spot under the American elms that lined the river. My heart pounding, fingertips laced with the sweat of strangers. That poem was previously published in a really sweet journal called Book of Matches, but will appear in the book What She Wants. So I finally got to have a trip to Paris after wanting to go my whole life, but I really wanted to do one thing. I had one major thing to accomplish, which was to visit Baudelaire's grave. And I was so excited. I went on my own. I used my little app on the phone and I found it. And for all of us who love Baudelaire, we know how Baudelaire loves the clouds, the magnificent clouds. And I wrote this poem for him called Visiting Baudelaire. Walking miles through ancient air, skinny streets, my head filled with his clouds, like a tick fills itself with blood. I butter my baguette length of a baton as I stroll to his grave. Everyone has given me pre-trip tourist tips, where to go, what to see. Every friend who's been seduced by Paris, as if we're all in love with the same woman, arguing over what's her best part. How long did she invite us to stay deep inside? I'm here for a week. My goal to visit Baudelaire's grave. And finally, I've arrived, but with nothing to give except an unfinished poem, which I place beside the dried yellow roses, discolored pack of Gauloise, another visitor's engraved leather notebook. There's no place for me to sit and talk with him. The sun burns a hole through his magnificent clouds. And even though he's dead, I'm too shy to tell him how I feel. This is a little tiny 4-line poem that I think has sort of the essence of what I'm going for in this book. It's called Desire is the Fire. It isn't always what you have fills your life with pleasure. Often what you wish was yours becomes your secret treasure. Not quite sure if that's true. I have to think about that. I want to see you glow, he tells me. So I rub pet products over my body, oil to make a dog's coat glossy. The hair on my arms is sparse, but I run fast and have an appetite like a wine mariner. I want to feel as good to the touch as a dog after a day at a dog spa, as energetic, intelligent, alert, steady. This human life is not right anymore. Look around. Join me for a chew treat and a dish of water. I'm picking the rather short poems from the collection. Sometimes it's easier to hear a shorter poem in the middle of the day. I don't know. I save the longer poems for at night. But I've picked 1 minute, 1.5 minute poems. So this poem is called Ink. I unscrew my fountain pen, a gift from a writer I love. That deep ink kind of love that can never be erased. He tells me I need to remove the cartridge before I board the plane. Tells me it will explode if it remains locked in the pen. Like my heart sometimes feels it's going to explode, so confined in my chest. This scares me, you see, because I'm not sure how to replace the cartridge without breaking the pen, and I don't want to mess it up. I try as hard as I can to follow instructions and not push too hard. I will try to unscrew and rescrew, and it should all be fine. After all, it's just a pen, albeit a pen that when I hold it in my hand, it appears my hand is dancing the words right onto the page, the words circling back to my heart pounding to get out. So this poem, you can get a sense of the thread of the book, that it follows sort of an obsessive love situation, and it goes through the different stages. And this poem is when the character is sort of in it. It's happening. And I'm sure a lot of us have been in this situation where you're going to meet someone and you're so excited and anticipating seeing them, and you can't find them where you're supposed to meet. It's called Waiting for You in the Bar. I'm here, you're here, but we're here separately. You in the room flooded with smoke and sun. Me in the lounge, dark leather seats surrounded by darker light. I think you're not coming, forgot, or got stuck in the endless traffic we now call home. I drink a tall vodka, suck the straw, my only chance to survive, get it deep inside, shut down the thought you might not be arriving. I know you're here. I can feel you. You're never late. You don't forget, but I can't get myself to look around. I'd rather drink another. Imagine strolling onto the beach, tide rolling out, wandering into someone else's dream. A kiss floating onto my lips, maybe yours. A white bird hovers, sends signals from a forgotten planet, calls me into another life. I'm here, you're here, but it doesn't matter. We've already been there and gone. The moon following until it's ready to pull us back. Sometimes poems come and you don't really know where they've come from, but you write them and then you look at them and you think, okay, I don't understand this that much, but I'm going to go with it. And this is one of those poems. It's called Control. There is eating and there is not eating. I have done both. I have gorged on tri-colored vegetable chips until salt oozed from my pores and my skin turned the color of a bruised blue potato. I have denied myself all 3 meals, fasted for days. I relate to dogs who fixate on their owners' pockets, waiting for treats they know are buried. I don't have an eating disorder. It's just my way of controlling my life. Denial is its own reward. I keep my running shoes close, my fanny pack loaded. I want to be ready for the big race. They will call on me soon. They will call on all of us. I want an empty stomach when I hear my name. I want to be the fastest, both in and out of love. So this is a poem called First Kiss. And for any of us who have had medical procedures, when you're having them, you try to think of anything else but what's going on. So here's First Kiss. Manny, the MRI technician, hands me earplugs. These will help, but won't eliminate the banging. He gives me a tiny sedative to place under my tongue, slides me into the dark tube, suggests I close my eyes, think about nice things, a glass of rosé, my first kiss. I want to follow his instructions, but my first kiss with the dark-haired boy with fat lips, no good at archery, Camp Tri-Woody, was a bust. Racket begins. I try to imagine what they might find, perhaps in my cerebellum, a family of idiots playing Go Fish, discarded toys, clowns, Legos, stuffed miniature bears strewn across my frontal lobe. Maybe they'll find questions on my little brain trees. What's for dinner? Why can't someone teach me how to work DirecTV? When will I see you again? Manny is kind. He tells me how long each pounding session will last. Only 2 minutes, he says into the microphone. How's it going? Fine, I say, but I'd prefer to think about a kiss I'll have in the future after they scrape the walls of my brain, eliminate extra synapses, remove connections no longer needed. That's the key, I think, as the banging becomes unbearable. And the boy from camp who couldn't kiss suddenly appears next to me, begging for another chance. So I'll read I'll read one or two more short ones. And I took a chance here, I guess, but I wrote a 4-stanza rhyming poem and didn't throw it away. I don't know. It just seemed to fit in this last section of the book, which is ecstatic release. And part of the poems in this section are about things that I did, or the character in the book, I should say, was able to release. And this poem is called Coming Clean. I've never read Jane Austen. I don't know how to swim. My gravy's not made from scratch. I toss glass bottles in the blue bin. I have removed my clothes for strangers. I have more than 5 drinks per week. The exotic fish in my tank are not exotic. I stole a rare shell from a protected reef. I once served a hamburger from the floor. I habitually curse. I have no upper body strength. I stole change from my mother's purse. I poked holes in my dolls' mouths. I really want to believe how these burdens have weighed me down. Kisses I'm still waiting to receive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim. Your poetry is eloquent and heartful, and the love and desire and obsession, and there's a transcendence in it. And then at the end, the coming clean. The poem about visiting Baudelaire's grave, I love, and you just touch on things that we all go through. And what I love about your poetry, among other things, even at the basis of your eloquence, is you are like, the dictum of William Carlos Williams, no ideas but in things. I mean, you make the world visible, but then you also include the interior, the throbbing heart, the pounding heart, and in ink, you write the kind of love that never can be erased. And so it's just so human, and yet it's transcending. And it just you're just so eloquent in your writing and helping us. We all go through these feelings, and so it's a guide for us and companionship to hear these poems. Could you just tell us? I know the 2 books of yours I've read, Dancy, the one about Tyrone Power's grave, and then The Wedding Dress for You, Mom. Those 2 books. How would you talk about this poem in comparison with them?
I think that I Wore This Dress Today for You, Mom was really about poems, feelings about my mother and her dementia, being a mother myself. It was kept to that. And this book, for me, there's a lot of poems in this book that I'm not even sure I would read at a poetry reading in public. I mean, I am dealing with the whole persona idea and the voice as opposed to me. I read recently, that everyone expects poetry to be autobiographical, and it's not necessarily. So I did take a lot of chances with these poems. Some of them are very explicit, and I really had fun putting this book together. It's different. It's taking some chances, and we'll see how it's received. I think that people will relate to the feelings here. The obsessive love feelings, and these were a lot different poems to write for me.
Well, you have that ability to transfer, into the persona, as you just said, and then bring them to life. As an actor, believe in something, and that belief helps you create that character, and you're really writing about yourself. But so the themes in this book, as you mentioned earlier, actually they're in the title of your book. Obsession the litany that you put there in the beginning. Did you actually? I mean, okay, we all have feelings like this, right? But did you go through them all, or was this simply like you're writing a play and it was separate from you?
Well, I've had these poems written over many years. There's about 100 poems in the book. About 40 have been published previously in other collections, and there's about 60 new ones. And again, just like with I Wore This Dress Today for You, Mom, I put the book together because I think, as Maura has just shown us, I mean, people do enjoy a book with a trajectory and, that goes through a storyline instead of having different poems floating around, which is great too. I like it more of a storyline. So I looked at my poems that I'd been writing for the last several years, and I printed out the poems that had to do with love and obsession and desire and lust. And I put them all over the floor. And then I looked through previous books, and I started to see how this fit this pattern. And I found the word limerence, which I loved. No one really knows what it means, but it does mean obsessive love. And I thought, I'll write a book to put in the categories of these different feelings that we have. And it did grow. So it does go from beginning to end, from the infatuation through the letting go and the release. And that was really fun. It was very fun to order these poems and have them tell this story and sort of build a climax, so to speak.
And as you said, that cathartic catharsis at the end. We have a couple of minutes left. Maurya, why don't you come on the screen, and why don't you and Kim each say something to each other about what you heard in the poems or about the poet? Let's start with Kim and then go to Maurya.
Well, I really loved your reading, and I appreciate, we talk about the voice, the poet's voice, and your voice is very consistently, it's both calming and soothing, as Harry mentioned, and you've mentioned in the work, but it also has an excitement and it's invigorating because it's very alive. So it has that really lovely combination. And I wrote something when the girl you were talking about her sexual awakening, and you said a deep bell that's cracking. And I thought, well, I may have to steal that for my book. So I wrote it down, a deep bell that's cracking. Anyway, I won't, but, I love that image. And there's a lot, again, the part human, part other. I love that. And I was just impressed by hearing you. There's a lot of control in the poems, but they also go off the page. That's a hard thing to capture, to really know what's happening in the poem. But then the poems have their own lives. They're little wild creatures. And however we take them in, we give them another life. We give them another dimension. So you gave me a lot of opportunity for that. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, 1 minute.
I'm sorry, what, Harry?
1 minute. We have 1 minute.
1 minute. Oh, how can I possibly say everything I want to say? I really enjoyed your reading so much. I love how you deal with these themes of love and obsession and desire and lust, which is very much a part of my book too for this young adolescent girl, and this idea of limerence. It's thematic. I mean, there's a coherence to the themes that you've bound together, which is very pleasing, just structurally, I think. Your poems that you read today have a wonderful sense of the concrete world, and you enact that with such compelling details. And yet beyond the details, there's always this emotional resonance, which I really admire, I think is really effective. There's some lines that I really, really loved, like, I think it was in the Ode to the Phone Booth, fingertips laced with the sweat of strangers. That's just wonderful, wonderful. And I think it was the Baudelaire poem where you say, even though he's dead, I'm too shy to tell him how I feel. which I thought was wonderful, talking to a ghost. I'm running out of time. In ink, My Heart Pounding to Get Out, I thought was terrific. I don't remember which poem this was, but The Moon Ready to Pull Us Back. Which poem was that?
Waiting for You in a Bar. In the
That's
bar.
right. That's right. And The Control, I really, really like the Control poem. I want to be the fastest both in and out of love. I mean, really memorable lines.
Oh, thank you.
There were just so many. I just jotted them down as you were reading them. I like the fact that there are dogs in the background and foreground in at least the poems that you read, which is really wonderful. The honesty. I think I really like the honesty in your poems very much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Means a lot to me. Thank you.
Both you poets were just so magnificent, and I always feel great after a great poetry reading like this. It always lifts me up, and so thank you very much. This is a sacred hour for me, and you two are certainly part of that sacredness. You make it that, as Maurya was just saying, about the dogs, there's that one thing where she'll do anything for throbbing. She'll do anything for love, and so anyway, we have run out of time, and I want to just thank you for such a memorable reading and intoxicating. So thank you, Maurya, Simon, and Kim Dower. And I'm going to announce who are reading next week. Next Tuesday, two marvelous actors will be with us. Garen Berry will read The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, and John Towie will present the poetry of Richard Wilbur, who is my favorite poet of the Neo-Formalists. So thank you once again, Kim Dower and Maurya Simon. And here's Jennifer Clymer to take us home.
Guys, thank you so much. It was a wonderful, wonderful hour, and hopefully we see you back here very soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You.